these Dynasty assets could break out in 2025, but we're going to make the case against them as well because they're definitely no sure thing. And you have a lot of these guys on the bottom ends of your Dynasty roster. Let's start with the first one here, Keon Coleman. A lot of people who roster Keon Coleman have him right now as a flex guy, but people are looking at Keon Coleman, and the best argument for Keon Coleman breaking out is, okay, he's in a Josh Allen offense. He has the potential to be the wide receiver one. You've only got Khalil Shakir there. Dalton Kincaid wasn't a very big aspect last year in that offense, and so theoretically, from a volume standpoint, there's plenty of room for Keon Coleman to break out this year. Now, let's look at what he actually did in 2024. He only played in 13 games. Remember, there were some games where he was injured, and there were some games where he was just in the doghouse. He averaged 8.6 points per game. When you're looking at his target share, it's 64th in the league, 15%. And again, on an offense where Kincaid didn't really have a big target share, Khalil Shakir actually had a 20+% target share, but there wasn't a dominant receiver there, and we haven't really seen a dominant receiver there since Stephon Diggs left Buffalo. And so I think a lot of people thought, since they drafted Keon Coleman, at the 1-2 turn in the NFL draft, that, hey, maybe Keon Coleman's going to come in here and be the wide receiver one. The one thing we knew about Keon Coleman, though, coming in was that he was a raw prospect. And so I think people have given him, an extra year, a little bit of leeway into this year because they knew that it would probably take a little bit for him to break out. Now, he is, again, 6'3", 213, bigger body guy, 22. He just turned 22 years old. That's the key. One thing that's interesting about Keon Coleman is his target quality rating was first in the NFL last year. He got the highest quality targets of any wide receiver in the NFL. And so when you're looking at his ADOT, he typically got longer targets. 15.2 yards was his average depth of target. And the rest of his stats don't really pop off the screen here. I think it's better to look at his reception perception profile because from a production standpoint, there was nothing there. From an efficiency standpoint, he was 50th in yards per route run. Again, the only statistic that really jumped off the page with Keon was his yards per target, his average depth of target, how he was being used. His yards per reception was 4th in the league, which honestly isn't a great sign. So let's look at his route running abilities, which is what reception perception. Again, we're citing our sources here. Matt Harmon does great work. We're fans of his, but let's look at this. He took 88% of his snaps outside, and when you're looking at his success rate versus different types of coverage here, in the 3rd percentile versus man coverage, in the 8th percentile versus press coverage, and the 23rd percentile versus zone coverage. So he's basically, what we were saying about Keon Coleman when he was coming out of college was that he really couldn't separate. He reminded us a lot of a George Pickens, right? And a lot of people say George Pickens can't separate. It's neither here nor there. But the data heavily backs that up. When he was running routes, he was not getting separation. He still had a high target quality rating, and he still wasn't getting enough target share, and he wasn't bringing in enough of those targets. So when you're looking at, all of this for Keon Coleman, yes, he is a breakout candidate, and he's somebody earlier in the offseason I think we were a little bit higher on, but as we've delved into the data a little bit more, we're a little bit more concerned about Keon in terms of the target volume he can actually get. The ADOT is going to come down, but even coming down from, what even is it? Even his yards per reception coming down from 19.2, even if you're like 16, that's still extremely high. And it doesn't usually, unless it's a type of receiver that has pretty good yak ability, unless it's a type of receiver that has a super high target volume, it doesn't usually lend itself to fantasy production. And so in Dynasty, I think we gave him a little bit of a longer leash this year, but if he does come out this year and he doesn't, perform at least like a wide receiver 3 level, I think he's going to lose a significant amount of value, and I don't think he's going to do that. And so at this point, my prediction with Keon Coleman is I don't think that he's going to be a heavy breakout candidate and gain value in Dynasty. And so I know we're starting our breakouts video with a guy that I'm not totally sold on, but he is a guy that a lot of you guys own. We get a lot of questions on, and so I think it may be worth exploring pivots from Keon Coleman, given the fact that his analytical profile doesn't lend itself to one that looks like it's going to break out in year 2.
Well, a little bakery reminder, too, with his prospect profile dating back to 2023. This shouldn't really be a surprise to us, given the tier and the company that he's in. He's in that dreaded orange tier at wide receiver, where the hit rates are abysmal. I mean, you're looking at the guys that went in that class with him: Tank Dell, Boutte, Mingo, Parker Washington. That's actually 2023. 2024 was Pearsall, A.D. Mitchell, Leggett, Troy Franklin's ranked ahead of him, McMillan, Corley, all in that tier. It just is not pretty. And when you look historically, every single year, I mean, the biggest hit there obviously is Puka, who's the outlier of all outliers and actually broke out as a rookie. Keon Coleman would really have to be an outlier at this point to be super successful, I think, long term. It's unfortunate because the situation was there for him, and we're just not seeing it yet. But again, if you want to take a shot at him, I guess that's totally fine with us. He's not super duper expensive right now.
Good situation.
And he does have high upside capabilities. Next guy that we're going to talk about here is Kyle Pitts for the 5th year in a row. I think he's going to finally break out after showcasing how wonderful of a wide receiver that he really can be. Yeah, wide receiver, not a tight end. No, it's actually not Kyle Pitts. I'm going to stay with the Falcons, though. It is Michael Penix. Michael Penix last season really sparked a lot of excitement, and deservedly so for people in the Dynasty community. I will say I've honestly warmed up quite a bit to Michael Penix over the offseason because I kind of went from him advocating for him being like a hard sell because what's his production ceiling and production outlook really going to be long term, and now just saying, okay, well, he's kind of at this point, he's kind of dipped in value quite a bit since the beginning of the offseason to a point where I'm cool taking shots on him when he's falling to you in the 6th round at the 5-6 turn. We've seen drafts earlier in the offseason where he was going as high as the 3-4 turn. If you're getting up the 5-6 turn, that's a way better price tag to take a shot on Penix. And what's the big difference there? The big difference is in the 3rd round, the quarterbacks that are going in the 3rd round of Dynasty startups right now in Superflex leagues are at the top of a large tier of quarterbacks whose production outlooks are all relatively similar, and their insulation is pretty similar as well. So what's the low end of that tier? Well, it's the guys going in the 5th, 6th, sometimes even beginning of the 7th round. And there's just not much of a production difference and insulation difference between all of those guys. So now when you have Michael Penix at the bottom of that tier, I'm much happier about you taking a shot on him. And I will talk about some of the positives. When he had 3 full games to play at the end of the season, weeks 16 through 18, he had 27, 35, and 38 pass attempts. He got more and more comfortable in that offense as a passer. His production obviously went up because his touchdowns went up. Not going to showcase really any rushing upside whatsoever, so that is a knock against him in his profile. But I will say, in terms of the hype, you're going to have a lot of hype around Michael Penix because he's going to be providing so much volume for all of the receiving assets in that offense, mainly Drake London, who we're very high on. And I'll just be completely honest, guys, for as high as we are on Drake London and him maintaining and maybe even increasing in value heading into 2025, I think by default you kind of have to be at least optimistic that Michael Penix is going to have a good season. And that just is something that needs to be baked into Michael Penix's prices. If you think London's going to be successful and like him as much as you do, Penix is probably going to have a pretty good season because it's not like we're discounting Bijan Robinson either. If Bijan's going to be productive, if London's going to be productive, if Mooney is going to continue his stretch that he had last year in an offense that really is looking to be built more towards his skill set and what he can offer there as a deep threat, like Penix has to continue this, and I think that he's absolutely capable of doing that. You saw what Cousins was able to do in that offense, and he did not look nearly as good as Penix did towards the end of the season. They benched Cousins for a reason because they thought Penix gave them a better chance to win, and he did. And that offense seemed to take a step up, not just in terms of like explosiveness, but consistency as well. Kirk Cousins was kind of shaky and hit or miss, game in and game out, and I think Penix could provide that stability, which will in turn help a lot of the guys in that offense who need more consistent target volume beyond Drake London, etc. So with Penix at this point, with his current price in Dynasty, I absolutely think he can break out not only from an NFL perspective as a true NFL quarterback, but production-wise, I think you're going to see more solid consistency there and really solidify himself in that tier where I think he belongs.
Let's talk about a guy that's actually not written on this prep doc that I pulled out of my booty and I'm going to start talking about right now. Let's talk about, and there's going to be a disclaimer here. Let's talk about Josh Downs because we haven't really talked about the case for Josh Downs breaking out this year. And I understand that some of you guys have correctly held us accountable for what can be a blinding Colts bias for us. And I will say this, last year, I think our Colts bias did get the better of us. This year, it's not going to for a couple of reasons. Number one, we know the Colts are a dumpster fire of an organization. Number two, we know the quarterback situation is awful.
We're on the other side of the extreme.
We're actually very low on Colts assets this year, especially their quarterbacks. But Downs is a guy that when you look around the Dynasty community, a lot of people are getting behind as a potential breakout candidate. And when you look at the numbers, you can very clearly see the case for why. When you're looking at what he was able to do last year, first of all, in his rookie year, he averaged 9 points per game. Last year, on a points per game standpoint, he averaged 13 points per game in 14 games played. He had 107 targets in 14 games played. And yes, he didn't have 1,000 yards receiving, but again, he was on track to do that had he played an entire season. With only 5 touchdowns, averaging 13.1 points per game is really good. But we used reception perception earlier to make a negative case. Let's use it to make a positive case. Because when you're looking at Josh Downs and his slot usage in the Indianapolis Colts offense, the dude wins routes at as high a level as almost anybody. When you're looking versus man coverage, the 90th percentile, versus zone coverage, the 92nd percentile, press coverage, 82nd percentile. Those are extremely good numbers. I think when you're looking at Josh Downs and, the main thing that people will use as an argument against him is the situation, which is admittedly terrible, is the quarterback situation, which is admittedly terrible. However, there's one thing you need to consider about Daniel Jones potentially and probably being the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Is we have seen within the last calendar year an example of Daniel Jones being able to not only support a wide receiver one, but give that wide receiver one probably the best utilization of any wide receiver in the league while he was the starter. Daniel Jones was the starter last year in New York through week 10. When you're looking at Malik Neighbors through 10 weeks, he only had 3 touchdowns, but he still averaged 17.5 points per game. And his utilization, when you butt his utilization up against Jamar Chase for that same time period, Neighbors blows him out of the water, utilization-wise. And you can do this with pretty much almost any wide receiver. For example, just plugging this in here. Let's do Justin Jefferson. Neighbors wins in most categories. Neighbors was maybe I don't know who else there would be an argument for. I feel like there's somebody I'm missing. I think he was pretty clearly the highest utilized wide receiver in that 1 through 10 span when Daniel Jones was the quarterback. And when you're looking at, some of his metrics during that span, his targets per route run 30%. His total target share was 36%. That is absurd. Daniel Jones will hone in on route-winning players and get them the ball. And that easy target isn't Michael Pittman necessarily anymore. It's Josh Downs. And I think it's part of the reason you saw a shift away from Pittman into Downs last year is because Downs is so much better at winning routes, and he's a lot more of an easy target because while Pittman, you've got, depending on what he's doing, he's a little bit more of a hybrid, working the sticks, being kind of a chains guy. He's been, kind of first down Pittman, right? Or third and Pittman is what we used to say. With Josh Downs, you can pretty much get him the ball anywhere. And he is almost always open, as you can see from his route running abilities.
Yeah, and quick note here, if you're thinking we're stupid for comparing Josh Downs to Malik Neighbors because of one metric, look no further than a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson. If you think from a skill set perspective, Downs is the same. You know how many targets Wan'Dale had alongside Malik Neighbors in that offense last year with Daniel Jones at the helm? 140 targets as an exclusive slot wide receiver that is not nearly as versatile as someone like Josh Downs as a route runner. If anything, that should be just as good a case.
That's his floor because Wan'Dale had a 25% target share in weeks 1 through 10 when Daniel Jones was the quarterback. Yeah. And Josh Downs last year had a 25.6% target share. Yeah. And this is assuming Josh Downs doesn't get better at all. And he absolutely will. Josh Downs is a fantastic player. You can pull receipts 2 years ago of me planting my flag on this dude because I think he's so good. I think there's a very good case. And again, if you want to say we're biased Colts fans and this is a bad pick and you don't want to listen to us for it, that's totally fine. I totally understand. And I do understand. I totally understand if you think that way. And honestly, again, people come at us for these takes. We're not telling you have to make these moves or buy these players or do whatever. We're not telling you there's no guarantee any of these players break out. We're just as wrong as anybody else on any other takes. And we know that. But I am saying I think there's a pretty good objective analytical argument for Josh Downs breaking out. And this is, the icing on the cake.
Yeah, icing on the cake. One more metric that I think is honestly very demonstrative of how talented a wide receiver can be and how effective and efficient they are when they're on the field is the targets per route run metric. And again, this isn't just a stat that we try to pull out of our butts and say, well, this guy's first in targets per route run, therefore he must be good. No, let's look who else ranked at the top in targets per route run. Let's look at some of the top guys in terms of targets per route run among wide receivers in the NFL last year. Puka Nacua was up top with 35% on a per route basis. He was commanding 35% of the targets. Malik Neighbors was right there, second. CeeDee Lamb, third. Other guys here, not a surprise. They all ended up being wide receiver ones. Nico Collins, Drake London, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, Amon-Ra, BTJ, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, JJ, Ladd, Zay Flowers, all in the top 25. None of those should be a surprise. They all finished as top 24 wide receivers. You know who is number 4 on that list? Number 4 is Josh Downs. He had the 4th highest targets per route run among all wide receivers in the NFL last year. He is in very, very, very good company. And I'm telling you guys, at his current price right now, this is definitely a shot that you want to take. He's going at a very affordable price. Next guy that we're going to have here is, I kind of want to, I'm going to pick someone here. George Pickens. I want to talk about George Pickens because I honestly go back and forth with Pickens and what I think his outlook is going to be this year. And we haven't really talked about him since he went to the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that's why we want to highlight him in this video. With Pickens, I will say this. this is the first situation where he's playing the role that he was meant to play heading into the NFL. He was drafted in the second round a few years back when Deontay Johnson was solidified as the quote-unquote wide receiver one in Pittsburgh. But Deontay, you know what his limitations are. He's a very, very good route runner. He doesn't play like an alpha wide receiver one role in his prime back in Pittsburgh when he was good, right? He was kind of like you wanted him to operate as a one of three and be that top option, but not like the alpha guy. That's why they took a shot on Pickens, and Pickens ended up admittedly taking away from Deontay Johnson and his production. Now you're looking at this situation in Dallas and you're like, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, no run game. Oh. So we're basically flipping from George Pickens in a terrible quarterback situation in Pittsburgh for 3 straight years, where they're running the crap out of the ball with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Arthur Smith is the OC last year. Actually, ironically, George Pickens had one of his better seasons on a per-game basis last season when he wasn't injured in an Arthur Smith offense. But all that to say, he was still very boom-bust. And throughout his career, he's been very boom-bust. I mean, he's had 84 targets in 2022, 106 targets in 2023, and then 103 targets in 14 games in 2024. So his volume went up, production efficiency was a little bit better. But overall, it's just kind of same old George Pickens. He's more of a best ball guy that you'd want to own, right? Now you're going to Dallas, and the passing volume is going up dramatically. CeeDee Lamb is that ultimate alpha guy, and they really don't have anyone else, right? Because Brandon Cooks has been there. He's shown some nice flashes back in the day, like last year and the year before that. Michael Gallup, before he retired, had some good seasons with CeeDee Lamb. But really, you haven't had any wide receiver behind CeeDee Lamb really step up and command a ridiculous amount of target volume and consistent production. And it's not necessarily CeeDee Lamb's fault for commanding a ton of volume in his own right. It's just because no one has really stepped up to the plate. Like, CD, as good as he is and as dominant as he is, needs some help in the receiving game, right? CD will be a lot better when you have another effective wide receiver who can actually be a consistent threat week in and week out. And Pickens is that guy. While CeeDee Lamb is a route runner, is tearing everyone up, and you've got your number one corners on him and maybe doubling him in zone coverage. Like George Pickens is not the guy who's going to be a ridiculous route runner. He's not going to be the guy who's going to cook you in man coverage. But if you've got him, if he's up against the second or third best corner, or you just throw up a contested catch opportunity for him because CD is covered. Like, this is the perfect situation that you could ask for George Pickens, because he's finally playing the role that he was supposed to play in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. He was never supposed to be the top option. He was never supposed to be the alpha wide receiver. That's not what he does, guys. That's not what he does. He's a more versatile, big play threat that can command some target volume across the middle of the field. And that's got to be a dream for Dak Prescott, right? He looks for CD, can't find him. He can chuck it up to Pickens.
I mean, I can make a case right here. Michael Gallup was the wide receiver 22 in that offense in 2019. He was a wide receiver 2. Brandon Cooks.
And that was in the glory days of Amari Cooper, right? Amari Cooper was there in 2019 too, right?
Yeah, I mean, but even Brandon Cooks, after Gallup was gone, when he came into Dallas, the wide receiver 38 in his first year there. So he was somewhat fantasy relevant. Those guys were both guys we were talking about as fantasy relevant guys, and they were not anywhere near where Pickens is in his career right now, and especially from a talent standpoint. I mean, everybody knows George Pickens is talented. It's just a matter of him putting it together. And so my prediction for his dynasty value this year, I think he maintains. I think he stays where he's at, and you can get a year's worth of flex spot production out of him. I think he's going to be a high upside too. I think it's a good situation for him.
He could very easily outproduce someone like Zay Flowers, who's kind of in the same price range.
I think he easily
as a wide receiver one in Baltimore's offense, but not like it's run first offense. He's kind of in the same boat that Flowers was in Pittsburgh for so many years.
Right.
So
let's talk about a non-receiver, since we talked about a lot of receivers, and we did talk about Kyle Pitts technically. But let's talk about Jalen Wright. And it's one of those things where I think it's being overlooked at least a little bit that Jalen Wright is on the depth chart, the running back 2 in Miami, in an offense where historically, I mean, when I say historically, I mean over the last couple of years, you've had multiple fantasy productive running backs there. And Jalen Wright's really cheap in Dynasty. Like, I mean, you can get Jalen Wright for a third, I think. And so when, there's also, they brought in Alexander Madison. So it's how much do they, give him the work versus how much do they give Jalen Wright the work. But I think it was, I'm trying to look up his contract. Will you look up Alexander Madison's contract for me real quick?
Yeah.
With Wright, though, I mean, he's 22 years old. When you look at his utilization in his first year, he only had 68 attempts. But I mean, that's 68 attempts with Achane there, Mostert's still there, Jeff Wilson's still there, and so they were clearly favoring those veteran guys, even as recently as last year. It's nothing, isn't it? Is it
1.1 million?
It's a vet minimum.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, so
the dude could be cut, and he'll probably be a healthy scratch a lot of weeks.
So I mean, basically it comes down to, if you think Jalen Wright is going to be the backup running back there, this one's easy, because from an opportunity standpoint, Jalen Wright is going to be in an offense where, number one, Jalen Wright's super athletic. You'll remember all of his combine testing metrics and things like that, but that's beside the point. He's in an offense where athletes like that are put in a situation to succeed from a fantasy football standpoint. Not only will he get some committee, because they're not going to give Achane, as much as I love Devon Achane, after I notoriously faded him and it fell flat on my face for it. I mean, Achane only ran the ball 200 times last year in 17 games. It's not really that much. It always is. And not to mention, he's on a lot of passing many receiving downs. Like, they're going to give somebody else there the ball a little bit. And so when you're looking, even Raheem Mostert last year, when he only played in 13 games, but he had 85 carries in 13 games, right? I mean, they were giving him the ball. They like to spread the love among their running backs, and some of them end up being sneaky fantasy productive. I think he's a breakout candidate, because there are two avenues for him to be productive. A, he's just in a committee and he comes in and takes snaps and he actually has some fantasy production. Or B, Devon Achane is off the field for some part of the season, which isn't inconceivable, right? Even though Achane, I wouldn't say he's had the worst injury luck of all time. If as soon as he goes down, just like any running back in their running back two in the NFL, the next guy up is going to be Jalen Wright, and Jalen Wright's a starter. And as soon as Jalen Wright is a starter in your dynasty leagues in season, you can flip him for a lot more than what he's worth right now. This is essentially a market play. But really, we're talking about breakouts. His skill set, because they also did bring in Ollie Gordon there, right? And, Ollie Gordon, I think we've made it pretty clear. We're very, very out on Ollie Gordon. But I just want to revisit a little bit. Jalen Wright, when you're looking at where he was valued, he's valued in this orange tier here of the running backs in the running back bakery model. He was the running back 6, though, in last year's class. He was just right behind Bucky Irving, right? He was ahead of, like Blake Corum, Audrey Gaspar, Ray Davis, those guys.
Ray Davis and Tracy.
And so, he really didn't have that bad of a Baker score. He ran a 4.38. And he's still extremely young. I think he's only just 22 years old. And so, maybe this is more of a situational breakout, which is fine. Because, again, in situational breakouts, you've seen running backs at this skill level. You want to talk about running back at the skill level. At the bottom of the tier he's in, Jalen Wright is the top guy in this tier. The bottom of this tier, the last guy is Tyron Tracy. And Tyron Tracy's breakout, because we'd say he broke out, was because he got the volume. People point to Tyron Tracy, and this is really, you can't, I've challenged people on this, and I haven't gotten a good answer. If you've got a good answer to this, make it in the comments. But Tyron Tracy, when you're looking at what his actual performance was, analytics was, yes, I understand the Giants situation was bad, but he did nothing to lock up that job. There was nothing that jumped off the page with Tyron Tracy's production or his play on film last year. He was good. He was good enough. Jalen Wright is good enough. It's a very similar situation. No, he's probably not going to be your dominant NFL running back, next dynasty stud, next dynasty sleeper. But he is going to gain value. And I do think you're going to see more of his skill set used than you saw last year, where he only had 6 targets last year. And honestly, I'm just looking at his bakery score here. His receiving dominator grade was nothing crazy. It was average coming out of college. But as a runner, I mean, I definitely think they'll use him, especially since they're using Achane as the receiver. And so Wright is, again, more situational, but I do think he has a pretty good chance of breaking out. Even if that breakout, not all breakouts are created equally. He has a chance of breaking out on, I'm trying to think of another running back that broke out on that level. Tracy's a good example. But he has a chance of breaking out relative to the other guys going in the 8th, 9th round of dynasty drafts. And I think, right now with him being valued where he is, you can get him dirt cheap. To me, that makes him a sneaky, again, market player, buy low candidate.
Ricky Pearsall is a guy that we've been all over the place in terms of his market value as well and how you want to play the market with him. I think, again, it can be very dependent on kind of your team build and what you're looking like in your contention status heading into the 2025 season. But with Pearsall, I do want to highlight this with him. His reception perception looks pretty solid for a guy that had limited volume last year, granted. He was 58th percentile against man, 83rd percentile against zone, 76 in press coverage. That's pretty dang solid for a guy who was shot before the season even started, missed a significant amount of time, came in when that receiver room was in shambles, and then he really honestly made a mark in that offense towards the end of the season when he finally got the opportunity to get a significant amount of snap share and opportunity. Pearsall is an older prospect. He's 24 years old. We knew he was an older prospect coming into the NFL. Still got first-round draft capital. I stand by Pearsall was the last-second insurance play in case they couldn't extend Brandon Ayuk and had to move him. I still think I think they drafted Pearsall because I think at that point in time, they didn't think that they were going to get a deal done with Ayuk. If you remember last season, Ayuk didn't get his deal done until like the middle of training camp. And a lot of people were projecting that he was going to be on a different team last season. He ends up getting extended. Then he tears his ACL in the middle of the season. So now we've got another season where Ayuk is probably not even going to make a dent in that offense until halfway through the season while he's easing into his role, not going to have a full workload until the last third of the season. And then hopefully he starts to resemble what he looked like before his ACL tear. You've got Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, and that's it. Debo's gone. CMC's coming back healthy. Yes, CMC's going to get his own. He always gets his own. You've seen CMC, George Kittle, Debo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk all be productive in the same offense at the same time. So I think the quote-unquote crowded room, that's way less crowded than it used to be. That's no longer an argument because Ayuk's out of that offense for all intents and purposes. And it's really, like I said, it's Jennings and Pearsall duking it out for the number one option. We're high on Jennings. We think he could be successful. If you're high on Pearsall and you think he's going to be successful, that's okay. How about this? How about both of them are productive? I just mentioned the four guys in the past that have been productive all at the same time in that offense. Kittle's going to get his own, and CMC, while he's on the field, is going to get his own. That's just going to be the way that it is. They're the two top options there. But as true wide receivers, you need some true wide receivers there, some true wide receiver skill sets. And Juwan Jennings, you saw what he did last season. Hopefully he can maintain that. He still is kind of boom bust. Pearsall, with his reception perception profile, some of the efficiency metrics that he was able to show, 10 targets in week 17 against Detroit, 141 yards and a touchdown. He started commanding some nice volume there at the end of the season. I understand it's a small sample size, which is why I'm not skyrocketing him up my dynasty boards. I think that ultimately he might have a limited skill set. He wasn't supposed to be the most versatile wide receiver as a prospect heading into the NFL. He is an older prospect. He has a history of getting banged up and getting injured. So there are plenty of caveats, plenty of yellow flags, at least with Ricky Pearsall in his profile. But I will say, at price right now, you can get him for the same price roughly as Brandon Ayuk, who's not going to play for most of this season, or definitely not going to be himself for most of this season. And we haven't even talked about the training camp hype yet, guys. I guarantee you, regardless of what your opinion is on Pearsall and what he'll actually do in 2025, you can throw it all away. It almost doesn't even matter because training camp's going to come along and Ricky Pearsall's taking first team wide receiver 1 reps consistently. Ricky Pearsall is Brandon Ayuk's favorite target. Ricky Pearsall is projected to be the wide receiver 1 for the San Francisco 49ers. Ricky Pearsall, second-year breakout incoming. Oh, super cool highlight video of Brock Purdy throwing the ball to Ricky Pearsall down the field. Nice one-handed catch, nice one-handed snag. 15% value bump, automatic.
So he could end up breaking out this year. All these guys, again, are breakout candidates. Do us a huge favor. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe. Also, I've got the link in the comment if you want to get a team blueprint for your dynasty team, flockfantasy.com/domain. Come join the community. But we love you guys. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace.